Welcome to the Darkest Dungeon mod spotlight, where I will showcase a modded hero and explain their mechanics. Today we will be taking a look at the Fury, created by Exaelus. I've been covering a lot of his mods recently, but they just happen to fit together with the theme I've been trying to do, and they're good nonetheless, so why not? The Fury is a knight of chaos and order. Wielding two blades and robed in heavy armor, he is a force to be reckoned with on the battlefield. As his name implies, his fury only enhances his power, allowing him to deliver a devastating flurry of blows when he becomes injured. His role in your party shifts depending on his health level and the stance you choose to keep him in. In Order stance, he is a tanky frontliner capable of debuffing or stunning the enemy. In Chaos stance, he goes wild, with powerful combo attacks and bleeds at the cost of his own health. Wow, let me tell you, the Fury has the easiest stat line to talk about. All of these stats, health, dodge, speed, crit, damage, are all average. Like, he is super average here. All of his resistances are about 10% above average, give or take. His trap disarm is maybe a little below average. He's not really someone who can disarm your traps, but maybe in a pinch he could. But otherwise, his resistances are pretty solid. He is also pretty mobile. His ability to move forward and back to faces. So if he gets shuffled, he can fix his positioning pretty easily. Now, the Fury starts with all of his skills unlocked for free. His first skill is how he switches between his two stances, the Order stance and the Chaos stance. These three skills are for the Order stance, and the last three skills are Chaos stance. Every battle he starts in Order stance, and he has to switch to Chaos using first skill. The skill is called Feral Impulse. You can only use it while under 50% health. So when he uses it, he switches to Chaos mode, or Chaos stance. It buffs his damage by 5 to 15% and his crit by 2 to 10% as long as he remains in Chaos mode. When he is in Chaos mode, he can use it to switch back to Order mode, giving him a small heal of 1 point up to 3 points for 2 rounds. When he is in Order stance, he gains 2 to 10 points of dodge and 5 to 15 points of protection as long as he remains in Order stance. If he is in Chaos stance and his health goes above 50%, he automatically switches to Order. And whenever you use Feral Impulse to change your stance, you can always act again immediately. So you can switch stance and then use an attack, but you can only use Feral Impulse once per turn, so you can't switch back and forth and take advantage of that healing. Now, before we get into the specifics of his Order stance attacks, one thing that you should take note is that all of his Order stance attacks bypass stealth. This might seem a little strong, but most of the stealth enemies are going to be in the back positions, and he has a bit harder time hitting in the back, so I don't think it's that big of a deal. And besides, he doesn't reveal stealth, it only allows him to hit stealth characters. So, regardless, it is some nice utility that he can hit them anyway, which might be useful for those pig enemies with the hooks, the swine slashers. Those tend to be closer to the front. Anyway, his first skill is Composed Slash. This is a pretty standard attack. He debuffs the target's protection by 5 to 15% for 2 turns. He buffs his own protection by 5 to 15% for 2 turns. And he buffs his stun skill chance by 50 to 70% for 3 turns. This is so he can build up to his stunning skill, which we'll get in a moment. But otherwise, this is a decent move to boost his protection and help bring down those bulky frontline enemies like Pelagic Guardians and the swine. I don't know, the swines in the front that have protection.
Their formation is broken. Maintain the offensive.
Fury's second order stance attack is Disciplined Trust. This attack has excellent accuracy for a level 1 skill. It has an accuracy of 100, but it has a damage modifier of minus 30%. But at least it can hit all front 3 positions, so it is a little more flexible than Composed Slash. It knocks back the enemy 1 with normal odds. It also debuffs their damage by 10 to 20%, and their stun resistance also by 10 to 20%. Additionally, it buffs his stun skill chance by 50 to 70% for 3 turns, just like Composed Slash. This is a little different if you wanted to mess with your opponent's positioning, or maybe bring one of the backline characters up a little bit by knocking back the enemy in front of them. You can also use this to set up his own stun on the next turn by lowering their stun resist. And you could also hit a powerful enemy like a Pelagic Grouper, just cut down their damage a little bit with that damage debuff.
Twisted faces of the damned, piled high and cloaked in malice.
And finally, his final order attack is Poised Cleave. This hits both positions 1 and 2 of the enemy team. It has a minus 60% damage modifier, so it's not going to do a whole lot. It has a weak knockback effect with only a base 80% chance at level 1, and it has a 0% chance to stun the enemies. However, this skill also buffs his stun skill chance by 50 to 70% for 3 turns. Combined with stun skill chance you probably built up by using his other abilities, get a pretty reasonable stun chance. Additionally, this marks the Fury for 3 turns, allowing you to draw some fire away from your other enemies, and hopefully getting his health down lower if you wanted to switch to Chaos Stance. Otherwise, Poised Cleave can be a pretty effective stun. Barbaric Yap on the Hellion has always been known as a really good stun effect, and Poised Cleave is no exception, though it does push the enemies back, which may not always be what you want, but it can cause some pretty fun effects, knocking the enemies around and stunning.
Press this advantage. Give them no quarter.
Chaos Stance. This is where the fun happens. Now, before we get into the details of the individual attacks, there are a number of common elements that all of them share. First of all of them bypass stealth and guard, but do not break stealth or guard. So he always can hit whatever target he wants, as long as it's not in position 4. None of his attacks hit position 4, but he can hit position 3 with 2 of them. All of his Chaos Dance attacks have minus 33% damage, but he makes up for that in other ways. All of his attacks buff his bleed skill chance by 35 to 45% for 8 actions. Whenever he hits an enemy, he debuffs his accuracy by 30 to 40 for 3 actions. If he misses, he does not get that accuracy penalty. Additionally, whenever he hits an enemy, he gets to attack again, and he loses 3, 5 health, depending on the rank of the skill, per hit. So, hit an enemy, your accuracy goes down, and you get to act again, but you take some health damage. Hit an enemy, your accuracy goes even further down, but you get to act again, take more health damage. So, getting one attack, of course, is normal. Your accuracy is going to be normal at that point. Getting 2 attacks, a lot of the time you're going to be able to get 2. 3 starts getting very infrequently, and 4 would be pretty hard to pull off, and at that point you're taking a lot of health damage. So at that point you may want to consider, not attacking. His first Chaos Dance attack is Raging Sunder. This has great accuracy as a basic attack. It debuffs your target's dodge by 5 to 15, and it lowers their bleed resistance by 10 to 20%. This is a great skill to lead with your combo because lowering their dodge is going to help offset that accuracy penalty, so you're more likely to follow up with more combo attacks. And lowering their bleed resistance allows you to set up his third skill, which does apply bleed. Otherwise, it's a pretty solid attack. I think most of the time I'm going to lead my combos with this. Fury's second Chaos Dance attack is Vicious Rip. The only unique thing about this attack is that it does 20 to 40% more damage versus bleeding, and it does have the added benefit of being able to hit the third position, unlike Raging Sunder. So if you have someone on your team who can prep the enemy by having them bleed ahead of time, Vicious Rip can be pretty good. Or just if the enemy's in that third position that you can't lead with Raging Sunder, then you might be able to lead this. Otherwise, you would probably wait until you led the enemy first, then use Vicious Rip. And the Fury's final Chaos Dance attack is Ferocious Laceration. He can use this from any position, and it hits the front 3 positions of the enemy team. This also moves him forward 2 spaces, so he can always fix his positioning while still being able to attack, even if he's all the way in the back position and he can't use Raging Sunder or Vicious Rip. Additionally, it has a 0% chance to bleed for 3 to 7 points for 2 rounds. This adds a lot of extra damage to his attack, but you have to set it up by using some of his other skills to build up that bleed skill chance. And in the meantime, he's taking damage from doing Chaos Dance attacks every time, so you have to be careful about how much damage he's taking. Still, Ferocious Laceration will just shred targets with how much damage it does. The Fury has a number of camping skills which he can apply. give himself or his allies buffs. I also like how the icons look. These icons have both blue and red, show that they are both chaos and order. This icon is only blue because it's order focused, and this one is red because it is chaos focused. His first camping skill is Wavering Demeanor. For 3 time points, he has a 33% chance each of applying 4 different buffs. He can give himself 15% max HP, 15% protection, 15% damage, or 5% crit. He can get all of them, he could get none of them, and anything in between. So, for 3 time points, it can be okay. If you get 2 of them, I think you come out ahead. If you only get 1, it kinda sucks. But it's not the worst. His next camping skill is Staggering Technique. For 2 time points, he buffs his skill chance, his stun skill chance, and his bleed skill chance by 25% each. This is just a solid buff to all of his various status ailments. If you're sitting in order stance a lot, you'll be able to knock people around and stun them. And if you're going into chaos stance, you'll be able to apply your bleed much more reliably. Next camping skill is Exhilarating Inspiration. For a massive 6 time points, he reduces everyone's stress by 20 and gives them a buff to reduce the amount of stress they gain by 20% for 4 battles. I think for 6 time points, it is probably correctly costed. It's really good in the amount of stress it removes, both now and in the future. It's a pretty good skill. If you have that stress to get rid of, it's not bad to use. Though, again, 6 time points is at least half of your, or it is half of your time points, unless you have bonus time points from the Outsider's Bonfire, for example. And his final camping skill is Critical Lesson. For 5 time points, all companions gain 10% crit and 5 accuracy as long as they are not religious. This doesn't include the Fury himself, but 10 crit and 5 accuracy is pretty good. If you have 2 damage dealers other than the Fury and an offensive support like Cultist, you can get a lot of value out of that. The extra crit is going to significantly boost your damage, and it's going to help keep your stress down because you're going to be getting crits. So I think the 5 time points is pretty reasonable considering how powerful this can be. Unfortunately, it won't work if you have Crusaders, Vestals, or anyone else who's religious. Some other things of note about the Fury: he is non-religious, so he can work just fine with the Abomination. You cannot have more than 1 Fury in a party, just like the Flagellant. Benefits from the Training Ring District. When you take him on missions, he brings 2 herbs as provisions, which the idea is that you would go into Chaos stance, do maybe 2 attacks, and your accuracy would be really low at that point, and you can take an herb to get rid of that, and then get a couple more attacks in. This is very risky because of the amount of damage you can do, or the amount of damage you can do to yourself, but you can also do a ton to the enemy. As long as you feel like you're safe enough to do so, then those herbs can use to great effect. The Fury can only use the Tavern to recover stress. He cannot use the Abbey at all, and he cannot get a number of quirks that relate to the Abbey, like Enlighten or God-fearing, for example, can't get any of them. The Fury also has a weird interaction when he dies. When he dies, all of your allies will relieve 25 stress, and they get a buff for 33% damage. I think for the rest of the quest. That's what it looked like when I was looking at the source code, but I never had one of my Furies die to test this out. So you'll just have to find out when one of them dies. Still, that's an interesting mechanic as opposed to most people die, everyone gets stressed out, and it's really bad. So when a Fury dies, it sucks, you lost your Fury, but everyone else is kind of relieved that this crazy enraged Fury is no longer a threat. One thing to note about how his Chaos Stance abilities work and the amount of health he loses. At max level, he has 45 health, so in order to go into Chaos Stance, you must be at 22 or lower, unless you have other quirks or trinkets to raise or lower his health. But at default, he has to be at 22 or lower. And every time you attack, he's losing 5 health per hit, assuming you leveled up his skill to maximum for his level. So losing 5 health out of 22, you're losing almost a quarter of your health each attack. And you can easily get 2 or 3 attacks off one turn. Tend to die very quickly without being guarded by a man-at-arms or a Houndmaster. And you're going to need a healer who's ready to keep him maintained between like the 10 and 22 health mark, which can be tricky. If you get a crit heal on him, he very easily could go over that limit and then immediately switch back into order stance, which is going to hurt his damage, but at least he's safe at that point. Honestly, in my experience, I found it very hard to get him into Chaos Stance. He just refused to take damage. That's what it felt like. And he tends to heal himself a lot with the extra healing on Feral Impulse. And even after I recorded some of the footage, the Exaelus lowered the amount of healing he gets from that. But nonetheless, I found his order stance to be most reliable. Chaos Stance just felt really hard to use. He kills himself so quickly with his self-damage. So, I don't know. Unless you want to babysit him, I don't see how it's that easy to use. You can give it a try. You can always give him health trinkets to increase his total health pool, allowing to use Chaos Stance a little safer because that half threshold is going to be higher. But I don't know. It seems like a rare thing to me, and mostly I'm just going to rely on his order mode stuns and knockbacks. In conclusion, the Fury is a solid, versatile damage dealer. As I said, I think he's more reliable staying in order stance with the bonus protection and dodge, dishing out stuns, but maybe you have more luck with the Chaos Stance than I have. If you can make the Chaos Stance work, he can deal out a tremendous amount of damage in a short amount of time. I just think it's too easy for the Fury to take an unlucky attack and he's immediately on death's door. If you have any thoughts, opinions, or strategies on how you have used the Fury, please leave them in the comments below. He slices, he dices, he's great at parties, he's a living blender, it's the Fury!